Want to embark on a lengthy deep dive into both the good and the bad of this franchise? Then you're in the right place. It's hard to think of many modern franchises that come even remotely close to the influence and repertoire of Harry Potter. So when the series got a broader rebranding as The Wizarding World and a set of prequels about a pre-World War II universe were announced, I, like many, was properly excited, even if a healthy skepticism lingered. How many prequels need to let us down before we learn our lessons? J.K. Rowling had yet to deliver a dud, so a benefit of the doubt was in order. And in the fall of 2015, we got to re-embark on a journey into the delightful and quirky world of this IP. While I remember leaving the theater with mixed feelings, but a generic impression of, that was okay, I must admit, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them has since grown on me to the point where I prefer it to some of the mainline films of its big brother. Looking at you, goblet of fiery Taco Bell shits. The world, characters, and story beats have a certain charm to them while maintaining a hint of darkness throughout. In many ways, it reminds me of the first two films. Even though there are some sinister and disturbing themes, the brightness, quirky world design, and genuinely likable characters shine through in an impactful way. But enough broad intro talk, let's dive right into this film. Starting with the musical cue from the famed John Williams score is a nice touch here, coming in at a mere 15 seconds while the WB logo is displayed. This is how member berries and nostalgia should be treated. It's swift, atmospheric, and serves to immediately put you in the wizarding world, but then quickly launches into a brand new score by James Newton Howard. This new theme stands on its own, maintaining the mysterious themes and tone of the classic score, while setting out to make something new and memorable, which, overall, is a great way to summarize this entire film. These are small details that matter, and I swear I won't go into total microanalysis here, but I can't help but appreciate this. We're then shown a mass murder committed by a dark wizard named Grindelwald, followed by exposition by newspaper headlines. Grindelwald is causing fear and panic, and his current whereabouts are unknown. Anti-wizard and witch sentiment is growing, and magical creature ownership is banned in the US. That's it, quick and dirty, and then the story is immediately underway with our protagonist, Newt Scamander, played excellently by Eddie Redmayne, arriving in New York City, passing by the famed Statue of Liberty on Ellis Island. It's a bit of a difficult task for modern travelers to understand the significance of such a sight as we all travel by air. Just take some melatonin and a few shots of vodka, pass out, and wake up halfway across the globe. No, this was a 15-day trek, and the sight of Lady Liberty marked the end of your wretched and sometimes dangerous journey across the rough waters of the Atlantic, and for many, the beginning of a new life. We see Newt talking to his suitcase on the boat, providing the inference some creature is inside of it. After the customs officer asks to see the suitcase, Newt flips a switch that says Muggle-worthy. This cheeky and quirky moment is short, but it's reminiscent of the early Harry Potter books, where the magic was, well, fun and quirky. It wasn't until book 4 that stuff got dark, and this is the sort of small but amusing details that went so far in culminating an effective and memorable wizarding world that would set the entire series on a path to success. Oh, and the Hufflepuff scarf in the suitcase. Nice touch. We're then thrust into the primary mystery of the story. Some force has destroyed a building in the city, and it's described by the witness as a dark mass with shining white eyes. Something then breaks free, causing a massive rift to develop in the road and travel towards the top of buildings and shatter some glass. This force, however, is invisible, which, in fact, makes no sense when we learn what the thing is. Forgivable detail, but certainly an oversight nonetheless. Let's talk about the way the film sets up this 1920s vision of New York City. From the cobblestone roads, the neglected and crumbling buildings, to the two stereotypical asshole detectives, the fire truck, the cars, and the general hustle. It's an excellent setup that makes the city feel believable. I'm not well versed in early 1900s New York infrastructure, so I'm unable to attest to the authenticity and accuracy, but for a time period piece of fantasy fiction, it works extraordinarily well, and does so consistently from the first 5 minutes of the film until the end. The combination of grime and decay of a city without modern regulation and safety protocols, all in contrast with the glamorous areas of excess that serve the elites, to the swanky areas of speakeasies and flapper counterculture. Great Gatsby vibes are aplenty. We're then introduced to our anti-witch and wizard brigade, the 2nd Salemers, holding a street assembly outside of a bank. It's a bit far-fetched, the idea of someone yelling about witches and wizards and dark forces stalking our streets and people actually stopping to listen. Anyone who has spent time in a city knows when you hear someone yelling about demons and dark forces, you do not stop walking, and you most definitely never look back. She eventually focuses on Newt and asks if he was a seeker. He replies, "I'm more of a chaser, really." Well played, good sir. A Niffler escapes from Newt's suitcase of fantastic beasts, which is a platypus with a fondness for expensive and shiny things. The perfect fantastic beast for the flapper era when you think about it. While this is the first of many beasts we're introduced to, the Niffler is likely to be the standout for most people. It's cute and offers character and charm in its behavior. Of course, it had to escape right next to a bank, which forces Newt into contact with Jacob Kowalski, an overweight, middle-aged man who just returned from a period of military service during the Great War and its aftermath in Europe. There were no major veterans benefits like home loans and the GI Bill back then, so Jacob is in the same situation as every other man trying to start a business, needing the bank to approve a loan. Jacob wishes to start a bakery in an era when baking is becoming automated by machines and his loan is denied. His character, standing defiant as a veteran and embodying the spirit of small business that, in our 21st century mindset, now admire, is an easy way for the film to establish him as a likable and pleasant character. It's simple but effective. There was room for nuance with the other characters in the franchise, so establishing Jacob as the immediately relatable character, the one you would want to hang out with and go for drinks after work, is a nice touch. The entirety of the bank scene is a blast, from Newt awkwardly encroaching on a woman's personal space trying to find the Niffler, to taking Jacob into the bank vault and getting caught by the loan officer who just refused him. It's all absurd in its shenanigans, but all fun must come to an end. As Newt attempts to obliviate Jacob, he is hit in the head with a suitcase, which just so happens to be Newt's as they share a similar case. It's at this moment we're introduced to our second lead and Newt's love interest, Tina Goldstein, played by Catherine Watterson. Apparently her full name is Porpentina, because of fucking course it is, but that's the last we will mention this. Tina is an Auror for the Magical Congress of the United States of America and is taking Newt in on charges for possession of unauthorized magical creatures, referencing back to the newspaper headline at the beginning of the film about the prohibition of magical creature ownership, as well as exposing magic to a no-mage, the American word for muggle. Jesus H. Is that really the best you can think up, JK? I know us Americans may not speak fancy English like you Brits do, but damn. Tell us how you really feel about our intelligence. On second thought, I'm good. Moving on. This is where the film gets special for me. The characters and setting are fine, but getting to see the American equivalent to the Ministry of Magic is something fans have long awaited for and has been the subject of much curiosity and intrigue. You could make an entire series, narrated by David Attenborough, of course, about different bodies of magical regulation and governance, and god damn it, I'd be in heaven. It might be the busy crowd of a dive bar on a Tuesday afternoon at that event, but like such an occasion, I will make it work. While a seemingly normal-looking skyscraper, walk into a special entrance on the left and you'll enter into an alternate version of the building, but magical. It does beg some questions, though. What if a muggle walks through that door? Does no one ever notice the person walking into the building to the left of them just disappeared? I imagine if this was a book, we would get some explanation here, like we do for most of the other seemingly glaring logical pitfalls of the Harry Potter series. But alas, it is a movie about wizards, so suspension of disbelief is a prerequisite. Upon entering into this new building, we see a magical clock device with 7 threat levels, which is pretty fitting for America. We love our governmental threat levels. Upon closer look at this device, you will also see witch hunts, exposures, and obliviations are tracked. While it is a swell-looking device, it doesn't really offer much to the story, except when it will be turned to level 6 emergency later on in the film. It is a fun callback to other clocks we've seen in the franchise, most notably the Weasleys. As for the rest of the building, it's nothing special, normal-looking skyscraper with a cloudy ceiling. You do see some moving statues and a wand polishing station, but it's nothing too extraordinary. All throughout the sequences in the building of the Magical Congress, I couldn't help but be disappointed in its aesthetic. Yes, as I stated, I love seeing this new interpretation of a magical governmental body, but it's also all a bit safe and it comes off as a bit uninspired, especially in comparison to the Ministry of Magic in London, as well as the one in Paris, which we will get to in due time. Don't get me wrong, the magical elevators do give a bit of Gringotts magical vibes, but all in all, I feel the creative energy for the film was spent elsewhere. We're shown the President of the Congress discussing magical threat we saw earlier in the film with Graves, played by Colin Farrell. I love this casting. Farrell is a fantastic actor with a mastery on delivering performances that can range from fun and lighthearted to sinister and brooding within a single scene. This threat is starting to cause panic within the non-magical communities, which the president fears risks war. The idea of conflict between the magical and non-magical societies and the division Grindelwald is sowing about how to deal with it plays extremely well for a series during this time period. I love the idea that witches and wizards are still humans and therefore vulnerable to the tribalist nature that lies within ourselves, and with it the dark ability to create the other in those we find ourselves at odds with. This ideology is fitting for the post-World War I entering into World War II timeframe. Continuing with the story, Tina has been demoted to a wand permitting office after an incident involving the Second Salemers. I love the mundanity of the wizarding government. Even magic cannot overcome bureaucracy. Should be a spell for that. Tina then gets reprimanded by her boss, Abernathy. Why do I even mention him? I wish I didn't have to. Kowalski returns to his home where the suitcase is open, causing several of Newt's creatures to escape into New York City. During the mayhem, one of the creatures bites him. Moving on to the orphanage, let's talk about a real bitch. Turns out the Second Salemers use orphan labor to pass out propaganda pamphlets while fear-mongering children with birth defects. Living in the Second Salemers hideout is Credence, played by an Ezra Miller who will surely need back surgery after playing this role. Damn. I get that he slouches to show the meager and defeated attitude of a societal outcast, but that shit has got to hurt. Conveniently, while walking in a massive city like New York just hoping to find Jacob, Tina and Newt just happen to come across a building that has been ravaged. Newt repairs the building because there are definitely no witnesses outside. Given the reaction to the bite Jacob is having, Tina decides they all need to stay with her and her sister until he's clear of any potential side effects. The Second Salemers are introduced by an eager son of a newspaper owner to his father and his brother, a U.S. senator, to try and run the story about the strange magical things terrorizing the city. The senator calls Credence a freak, which are words he surely won't trip over. At Tina's apartment, we're introduced to her sister, Queenie, a stereotypical early 20th century housewife caricature without a husband, who just so happens to be a witch and a mind reader. I can't help but love Newt's mannerisms while this scene plays out. While Jacob and Queenie are the focal points of the scene, as it plays out, Newt awkwardly looks around the apartment, trying to fade out of their attention so he can find a means of escape. His attempts are not subtle enough for a mind reader, and he is forced to have dinner. After dinner, Newt and Jacob are forced to sleep in the bedroom so he cannot escape in the dark of night. Which is dumb because, as it turns out, he escapes just fine through the fire escape. Also, he is a wizard and can disapparate. Don't get me wrong, I love the world J.K. Rowling created for this Wizarding World IP, but sometimes I feel as if she forgets the rules of her own game. Allow me a break from the story for a swift tangent. Back in January of 2019, Pottermore tweeted out that prior to adopting modern plumbing, wizards used a spell to disappear their shit. True story, this happened. Only one small problem, but by small I mean the entire premise of the second book. A chamber of secrets, accessed only by plumbing, wouldn't have been made by one of the four founders of Hogwarts if there was, in fact, no plumbing. I get it, we're talking about something entirely fake and there are real world issues, but as an author and a creator, come on. Play by the rules you created, otherwise nobody's on the internet are going to make videos. Not like me, though. After being left alone, Newt enters into his suitcase. This whole sequence is charming, with Jacob's reaction stealing the show. Throughout the entire film, Jacob's reception of this new magical world serves to remind us, oh yeah, magic is special, by offering a new pair of eyes to view it from. Inside of the suitcase, we are introduced to a whole variety of new fantastic beasts, including the mini-groots, aka bowtruckles, some snake bird creatures, a pair of endangered Cthulhu horse things, and a giant bird native to Arizona, which is why Newt is here in the US. Newt found this creature in Egypt and intends to bring it back to its native land. I know it's not the most creative thing in the world, the idea that wizards, like humans, would engage in careless acts of wild animal trafficking and causing some species to go extinct, but I can't help but appreciate this lore and world building. Similar in vein to the ideology and philosophy of Grindelwald, which we will get into, I appreciate that the wizarding world isn't this black and white cookie cutter world of good versus evil, much like it was with Voldemort. There is some nuance in the Harry Potter saga, but at the end of the day, it's fairly shallow for 90% of the villains. Spare the Malfoys and Snape. I appreciate the more mature and grounded world this series is building through small details of exposition such as this. A dark forest of particle effects is seen amongst the creatures in Newt's suitcase, which Jacob is drawn to. This is revealed as an obscurus, which is easily the most intriguing part of Wizarding World lore to be introduced in this series so far. An obscurus is a magical parasite that grows within a wizard or witch who suppresses their magic. That witch or wizard, afflicted by the obscurus, is known as an obscurial. The film refers to a period of time when witches and wizards lived amongst humans but were hunted down, referring to real-world witch scares and burnings. A child growing up in that society with this force emerging from within would surely try to suppress it. That suppression would cause an obscurus to grow, feeding off the magical energy of the individual until eventually killing them, no later than the age of 10. Newt explains that he tried to separate the parasite from the child, removing their magic, but sparing their life. He was successful in removing it, but the child still died, leaving this inactive, but dark and looming force. The look of the obscurus is absolutely commendable in its terror. It's a fairly simple giant particle effect, but the way it sort of glides and pulses is haunting, delivering a powerful image for this unsettling force of childhood mortality. What more can I say? I strongly commend this aspect of the story. We later see Credence passing out flyers when he is summoned by none other than Graves, who has a conversation with him about a great force under the age of 10 who is seen close to his adopted mother. Whatever could this force be? You realize Graves knows he's dealing with an obscurus, as no obscurus lives past the age of 10. Graves explains that he sees Credence standing at his side, joining the wizarding world. This social outcast, denied of affection from and abused by his stepmother, is looking for self-actualization in a world he does not fit in with. So the wizarding world is his opportunity for belonging and purpose. Graves understands this and is clearly playing off of Credence's pain. After leaving this meeting, Credence is late to come home and faces a physical beating with his own belt by his stepmother. What a bitch. Heading back to Newt and Jacob, after treating his bite with some fancy wizard hippie herbal medicine and taking care of the wildlife, they're off to find the beast that had escaped. Jacob initially protests, not wanting to betray Queenie. However, he obliges Newt after having obliviation explained to him. Our beloved Niffler is found in a jewelry store in an upper-scale shopping district of New York. The awkward look on Jacob's face as Newt wrecks the store chasing the greedy platypus is delightful, but the party is quickly crashed when the 5-0 show up with shotties. Newt is able to disapparate after a random free-roaming lion distracts them. He does leave the entire shop wrecked, likely hundreds of thousands in property loss and damages, but no big deal for our protagonist. He's on to Central Park to find the next one. At the Central Park Zoo, Newt's erumpent, which is simply a rhino that leveled up pyromancy, has been causing chaos by breaking open cages, hence the lion. This sequence of events is fun enough, especially with Jacob in what looks like rugby gear, but I do find it to be one of the weaker beast scenes within the film. The whole sequence of Newt performing what appears to be a mating dance, followed by Jacob being chased, just seems safe and predictable, likely geared towards younger audiences. After capturing the beast, they head back down to the suitcase to take care of some beast business, only for Tina, who has tracked their location and is pissed about the escape, to lock them in the case. While she is transporting them back to the Magical Congress for Newt to stand for his crimes, the creature that's been terrorizing the city comes for the very same douchebag senator that was seen earlier belittling Credence. And in a glorious scene of Wizarding World horror, he is brutally murdered. Another politician bites the dust. This scene is over fairly quickly, but one thing that David Yates has shown in his prior films is his ability to portray acts of brutality and horror effectively, even in short bursts. Remember the Half-Blood Prince when Katie Bell is cursed by the necklace? There's almost a grace to the terror, as with the Obscurus in Newt's suitcase. Tina arrives at the Congress and bursts into the chambers of the Congress with all the grace and subtlety of the Kool-Aid Man, and is greeted by them as such. Remember, Newt snuck out after bedtime and was out capturing beasts. Presumably, this is in the middle of the night, so what did she think was going on? Everyone decided to go into work at 3 a.m. in case she showed up with a suitcase? Well, as it turns out, they're actually assembled due to the murder of the senator and are not amused by Tina. Nevertheless, they do allow her to reveal Jacob and Newt in the suitcase. The case is taken into Graves' custody, and upon inspection, the Obscurus is discovered inside. I've never seen that before in my life, officer. You planted that. Newt is sentenced to death as the Obscurus is framed for the murder by Graves. Tina is also sentenced to death as his accomplice. What the fuck? The magical worlds in each country tend to reflect the broader systems of governance of their regions, so it is a bit off that the US wizarding world, inside the first country to implement the concept of innocent until proven guilty by a jury of their peers, just says, if the G-Man says kill them, let's kill them. The killing curse was a big deal in the Harry Potter books, an unforgivable curse. But here, the governmental employees just literally smile while sending them into what one would assume is a torturous death. They're throwing alleged criminals into vats of acid. Let's just call a spade a spade. Holy fuck. And these are the good guys? Why is she smiling? It's not that big of an office. Surely this woman has had to have some interaction with Tina before. What in the name of Merlin is going on here? And they replay your favorite memories like a pensieve as you melt alive? Why is Tina's favorite memory when she attacked the second Salemers? Why are we wasting office chairs? Can you imagine the press watchdogs of the wizarding world writing governmental spending reports on waste and fraud? Why, Madam President, are we spending millions of galleons a year on office chairs? What happened to all those chairs we bought last year? Let's circle back to that one. Anyways, the only useful bit of information we get here is why Tina attacked the second Salemers, setting her on this path of humiliation and disgrace. Newt's handcuffs are picked from his bowtruckle, Pickett, and he is able to mount and escape from the dungeon. With the aid of Queenie, the four of them complete their escape from the Congress. Well, now they're all fugitives from justice, so naturally the first place they go is a seedy bar. Now we're talking. Why are they there? To find out where the last of Newt's escaped creatures are. Wait a minute. They just tried to execute you. You're fugitives. Leave the sloth and run. It'll be fine. It can see the future. I'm just so confused. They meet with the goblin-looking fellow who apparently knows things, like a mafia guy. The concept of a black market wizarding world is actually pretty cool. We've seen glimpses of it from places like Borgin and Burke's, but I'd really like to see more of this. A spin-off series about mobster goblins. Let's make it happen. The goblin has heard some things, but he wants compensation for the information, and the price is Pickett, as bowtruckles can pick any lock. Why? Why give him Pickett? He's got like 50 of them in his suitcase. Newt does give it to him, only for him to reveal he's already tipped off the feds, who bulge in with all the grace you'd expect. In the scuffle that ensues, Newt is able to get Pickett back, and they escape, headed to the location of the beast. Inside of a department store, they find the creature, a demiguise, which is a sloth-like creature that can turn invisible and has the ability to see likely outcomes. It's a pretty unique idea, trying to capture something that can see your most likely move before you make it, requiring them to act unpredictably. Well, unfortunately, we don't actually really get to see the scene we've been promised by that concept, instead revealing the demiguise as caring for another one of Newt's creatures, an Occamy. The serpent-bird hybrids of sort, that have the ability to grow to the size of the room they inhabit. Wait a minute. The ones from Newt's suitcase were small, even though it's a big enough space for the Thunderbird to fly around in. Suspension of disbelief. The following sequence is good fun with the demiguise showing what's going to happen before it does, as the whole crew gets stuck in the attic of the store trying to find a bug and a teapot to trap it in a smaller vessel. Newt released the Occamy back with its siblings in his suitcase, and Queenie discovers a photo of a woman who Newt identifies as Lita Lestrange. Queenie reads something in Newt's mind that leaves her to say that he needs a giver, and Lita was a taker, implying that there is some history of heartbreak, with Lita potentially at fault. While all these shenanigans are occurring, Credence, who was sneaking, finds a wand under his sister's bed. Is she the Obscurial? Well, bitch lady sees it and Credence tries to say it's his, but she's not having it. Graves comes to the second Salemur's home to find it wrecked. He finds Credence and we're led to believe his sister is the Obscurial and struck out when attacked by the mother. He dismisses Credence as a squib, leaving him to his tears. Only Credence, as it turns out, is the Obscurial, and a powerful one at that, being able to control it and live with it well past the age of 10. Credence, feeling betrayed by Graves, attacks him, then sets off to destroy the city. Why? Because we need an epic showdown for the finale of the film because audiences want shiny things. Causing a massive commotion while destroying the city, the gang takes notice and they're off to try and save it as Newt, clearly haunted by the girl he failed to save, is likely looking for an opportunity for redemption. I must admit, big action set pieces are starting to bore me, and this one does nothing to change that perspective. Remember the finale of Goblet of Fire? There's no massive battle, it's the resurrection of Voldemort followed by a murder. Sometimes less is more, but alas, we get what we get, and CGI destruction porn sells to foreign audiences. Credence is going full on rampage, causing countless casualties along the way. Remember when I said one of the opening sequences didn't make sense because the dark force was invisible? Well, here it's revealed as Credence and an Obscurial. And it ain't invisible. Graves, realizing he done fucked up, is trying desperately to get Credence back on his side, but he's having none of it. The battle goes into a subway station, and Newt begins working his magic of words. I admire that he is a fully grown, powerful wizard with many creatures, yet he is using the power of persuasion and empathy to combat this force. Unfortunately, the feds show up again and open fire on Credence, causing him to explode into another massive particle effect. This moment is an effective scene and a powerful conclusion to the film. Graves stands up and begins the condemnation of his fellow wizards. Us as an audience can't help but see the point he is making here, that this act of brutality and excessive force seems to be a miscarriage of justice, and our sympathies lie with Credence, this child who's been belittled, abused, humiliated, used, and perhaps most heartbreakingly, ignored. This kid has been dealt so much grief and pain that his actions of violence, while worthy of the strongest condemnation, are understandable. It's then Graves is revealed to be Grindelwald, played by Johnny Depp. I appreciate this moment, not because I'm particularly fond of Johnny Depp or his portrayal of Grindelwald, but the character that is being set up, a figure calling out the abuse of authority of the wizarding governance, as well as the laws that force them underground out of the knowledge of the humans. Who does this law serve to protect, the wizards or the non-magical? The line about history remembering what the Magical Congress had committed that day is memorable. We will get more into Grindelwald's philosophy with the second film, but while we recognize this man is evil, the fact that he is being set up as a three-dimensional character in comparison to Voldemort, a character with very little depth and nuance, is a refreshing change of pace for the IP. Grindelwald is taken into custody, but now the problem exists of what to do next. The wizarding world has just been exposed. Well, Newt's got a solution for that. The Thunderbird, whom he was trying to release in Arizona, has the ability to make it rain. And combining that with the venom of one of his beasts, he is able to obliviate the entire city while the wizards reparo it all up. One problem. What about all the dead cops? And the countless other injured people? You can't reparo death unless you have a Peter Pettigrew and a bunch of hands to cut off. Some dark wizarding shit going on here? Newt is ordered to leave New York, and he shortly does, but not before saying goodbye to Jacob, who walks into the rain to obliviate himself. Newt finds him at his factory job and leaves him with the alchemy eggs, which are made of silver, as collateral for his bank loan. Jacob opens up his shop and the lines are out the door to get in. The bakery items are in various shapes of Newt's creatures, insinuating that he was not obliviated. Newt then says farewell to America and promises to write Tina, as they obviously fancy each other. Tina asks about Lita Lestrange and Newt says there's nothing there, or is there? The music in this scene deserves a special shout out. It's absolutely splendid. One of the most memorable pieces I've heard in a recent film. And roll credits. I'd say this movie is good to great. The plot holes are aplenty, and during the writing of the script for this video, I've come to notice the glaring issues much more clearly, but I can't help but enjoy what the film gets right for the majority of its runtime, which is a sense of charm, mystery, and quirk. blended well with the darker, more mature themes we would hope to see in a Wizarding World tale told from the perspective of adults living in a mid-20th century world. Most of the characters work well enough, with Newt and Jacob being the standouts. Newt is immediately likable with his charming and quirky sensibilities. It's fun to see a tree-hugger hippie wizard of sorts, similar in vein to the Lovegoods. From his timid demeanor thrust into awkward situations like the bank to his strong resolve to raise his voice in defense of the creatures, he stands out as a unique and memorable character within the IP, and I'd say easily stands amongst established characters like Tonks, Lupin, and the Weasleys. Jacob stands out because he is a Muggle character that's not despised like the Dursleys. His ignorance of the Wizarding World provides the audience with a pair of fresh eyes to see the world from and recognize the magic of it. He is much more than that, though. He fits in with Newt, standing next to him as an equal. You never get the impression during their interactions that they think less of one another, even if they're of an entirely different world. Their unlikely companionship works in this film, and it's carried on and expanded upon in the second quite well. Speaking of Jacob, the relationship with Queenie is a bit awkward and forced. She just immediately falls for him for reasons. It's sort of just there and the audience is asked to accept it, but for me, I mostly don't. There are moments of fun between them, but most of the time they're interacting, I'd rather it just be back to him and Newt. Tina is a bit of a mixed bag for me. Don't get me wrong, she's an enjoyable character, and I at least buy the chemistry between her and Newt, and they're fun when on screen together, but she's bogged down by her rash and oftentimes entitled behaviors. She just barges around the Congress building with a sense of righteousness. Many young professionals in a public service position often get carried away with the job, but like such interactions with those persons, it comes with a difficult amount of cringe to swallow. The musical score by James Newton Howard is another standout for the movie. It captures the sense of mysticism and magic that the series is known for, while also adding a swing and rhythm that encapsulated that roaring 20s time period. The direction by David Yates is also commendable. I mentioned his work with the obscurest imagery, but it's also the cinematography and general pace of the film. It drags a tiny bit in the middle around the Central Park time frame, but when you actually stop and think about all the various storylines the film has to connect, he does a good job threading it into a cohesive and entertaining ride. The story mostly works too. The plot holes are aplenty, but Rowling has done mostly good work. She demonstrates her creativity is amongst the best in the business, and her ability to craft new storylines within the world is worthy of applause. The thing I respect the most about this story, though, is that these characters and this world stands on its own. Dumbledore is mentioned, and some wink and nod references serve the memberberry nostalgia, but it's all very subdued and minimal. The boldness of saying no, we're not going to try and make everything connect to the established universe is something that I love and want more of. The Force Awakens is a prime example of how not to make a new story within an IP. It's nearly a beat-for-beat retelling of the first film in the franchise, and people loved it for that. Taking a risk sometimes doesn't pay off, and these films aren't doing quite as well as I'm sure WB had hoped, but I will always take something that falls flat on its face while trying something new over something that a better original version already exists for. Fortunately, Fantastic Beasts doesn't faceplant, nor does it crawl, but instead stands firmly on its own. Now we must dive into the sequel, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Released as the second film in what is supposed to be a 5-film run, does the steady pace stay in motion? If the first film is standing on its own 2 feet, I wouldn't say Crimes falls on its face, but it does hunch over like Credence's bad posture. Sure, he's standing, but he's going to need some physical therapy by the time he's 20. Upon first viewing at the theater, I was convinced the franchise was done for, and it's easy to understand why. The pacing is widely inconsistent and sometimes painful. The story seems to be losing its creative steam, and the damage done to some characters, both new and beloved, ranges from shit-slinging to bloody fucking murder. Oh, and in that dung that's being slung, member berries. So many. All those positive things I just said about Fantastic Beasts approximately 30 seconds ago, yep, gone. Upon second, third, and God help me, a fourth viewing for this video, I've come to appreciate some of what this film does and do have some hopes for what it's setting up. But enough of the vagary, let's dive in. The film opens up with Grindelwald being held in a magical Congress prison, where he's presumably been for the past 6 months that have passed since the ending of the first. He's being held in a magical bubble of sorts, which raises the essential questions. How does he poop? If he rolls over in his sleep, does he die? Is there a magical cure to prevent compression syndrome? His tongue has been removed due to his persuasive capabilities. Well, now for some reason the Ministry of Magic wants him to stand for his crimes in Europe. Dude is serving a life sentence in a presumably secure facility. Why would you risk moving him? He's put into a locked carriage powered by thestrals. Remember this guy? Neither did I. I had to scroll up 7 pages in the script to recall the name of Tina's boss, Abernathy. Abernathy hands the British gentleman Grindelwald's belongings, which include his wand as well as a piece of fancy jewelry. Wait a minute. What? Why are you giving him the wand? Oh, we're transporting the most powerful wizard in the world. Let's make sure not to separate him from his power. Remember the fate of this wand? You could have solved all this shit then and there. At least don't keep it within his proximity just in case. I don't know, some shit goes south? Well, it turns out Abernathy is amongst the staff to fall victim to Grindelwald's persuasion and had actually consumed polyjuice to switch places, and now Abernathy is Grindelwald? And he has the wand. Who is in charge of evidence in this establishment? He then proceeds to kill a bunch of people before opening up the carriage. Apparently Abernathy had his tongue removed, so that means he must have been in the cell for quite some time. Let's get this straight. Before the whole chase scene with the carriage, Grindelwald hands over the fake wand and the fancy jewelry, meaning it was already in his possession along with the real Elder Wand. Why does he participate in this whole thing again? Why would he risk losing this presumably important item to save Abernathy? He was already home free. He could have disapparated out of the building and have been home free before Abernathy's polyjuice ran out. Why would someone as cold and calculated as this brilliant villain risk everything to save this one random wizard? As we will see later, he's more than willing to lead his followers into death for political purposes. Sure, the scene is aesthetically pleasing, but that doesn't save the sloppy writing and illogical character choices. Opening sequences are meant to grab the audience's attention, set up a conflict, and set the tone for the film. Credit where credit's due, I guess, as these same problems are going to be aplenty. This is going to take a while. 3 months have now passed, and Newt finds himself at the Ministry of Magic to try and get his travel ban lifted, as he presumably has been stuck in London for the past 9 months following the events of the first film. We're reintroduced to Pickett in a charming scene of a race to a button. I absolutely love this reintroduction to Newt. It immediately sets his awkward and quirky tone and mannerisms, as well as showing his relationship with his beast companions. Anyone with a cat or a dog has likely played a similar game with them, and I can't help but smile at it. We're shortly introduced to Leta Lestrange, the woman we know Newt has some history with, played by Zoe Kravitz. Newt is surprised to see her as she explains that Theseus had convinced her to join the Ministry family, which they chuckle at. I do have to take a moment to shout out the 1920s vacuum cleaner that's been magically enchanted. Sure, they could use house elves, but the absurdity of the thing is just plain fun. Newt has been avoiding dinner requests from his brother and Leta, who are engaged. Awkward? After being asked, why do strange creatures love you so much? To which he replies, there are no strange creatures, only blanket people. That's one fire retort. What happens next is worth an analysis, as it does aid in the accumulation of information that paints a rather interesting painting, the relationship between Newt and Leta. They share a laugh over Newt getting detention for saying that motto to a teacher at Hogwarts, and Leta asks him if he remembers that she lit off a dung bomb in order to join him. Newt awkwardly looks down, avoiding eye contact with her before saying he doesn't actually remember that. The expression on his face here remains blank, like he's trying to not show any emotion, while she clearly is unsettled by this. Now, this could be one of two things. 1, Newt doesn't actually remember, or 2, he is lying. Again, this may seem like I'm diving into nothing, but I actually find this scene and how you interpret his response to be important in understanding the events that unfold, especially the ambiguity of the ending. We don't know exactly what Newt's history with Leta is, but we do know there is a history and she holds a special place in his heart. Whether this place is romantic or companionship remains to be answered. We now know from this scene that Leta also has some strong feelings towards Newt, and what those feelings are also remain unanswered. Let's examine the first possibility. If he doesn't remember, this is setting up the possibility that Newt's relationship with Leta might mean more to her than it does for him. Or maybe his role in her life has more significance than her role in his life. One thing would be clear, though, that the roles each played in each other's lives were not the same. Perhaps the classic case of friend zone. If the second possibility were to hold true, then the significance would mean that Newt is trying to keep her at a distance. Why is he trying to do so? Perhaps he was friend-zoned and that's why he is refusing the dinner invitations, trying to keep a distance from a situation that causes him pain. In the first film, Queenie reads Newt's mind when she discovers a photo of Lita in his suitcase, telling him that he needs a giver, and Lita was a taker, so this would seem to track. Or perhaps he does care for her, but something with the long distance of his work has caused a rift. While we won't get clear answers in this film, I think the second interpretation, Newt pretending he doesn't remember, is the more likely of the possibilities, given some of the information we can gather later on. But enough of that for now, let's keep moving ahead. This moment comes to an interruption upon the arrival of Theseus, Newt's brother, and certified G-Man Auror. Before heading into the hearing for Newt's travel ability, Theseus asks him to keep an open mind. In the meeting, he is asked,
"You want an end to the ban on you traveling internationally. Why?"
Which he replies,
"Because I like to travel internationally."
"Well played, good sir." Newt is given a proposition. His international travel privileges will be reinstated if he agrees to work for the ministry in his brother's department.
No.
Newt again with the brutal retorts. He doesn't need to cast Incendio to roast these bureaucrats. Well played. Newt is implored to reconsider as Grindelwald is threatening the peace that has existed between the wizarding and muggle world for over 100 years. According to the ministry, Grindelwald believes it is pureblood's right to rule over all people, including the non-magical, and he sees Credence as the key to his success. Yep. That's right. The Obscurial that was killed in the first film during the dramatic final that raised the question of who is the actual bad guy here? Well, let's throw that out the window because he's still alive. I like that Credence seemingly died. It was a tragic story that gave nuance and ambiguity to this world, but it turns out he's still alive and kicking and in Europe nonetheless. Newt says he will not kill Credence and we're introduced to this guy. Could you be any more obvious that this dude is evil? His reveal is so blatant and unsubtle that he might as well be listed in the credits as generic bad guy. Newt storms out of the room and subsequently his travel documentation remains denied. Theseus catches up to him to urge him to reconsider as the time is going to come that everyone will have to choose a side, to which Newt replies coolly, "I don't do sides." God damn, we're 5 minutes into Newt being in the film, and we are getting zinger after zinger. Theseus gives Newt a brotherly hug, and during the embrace, he whispers to him that he is being followed. We are now given our first glimpse of 1920s Paris in the wizarding world. I don't really want to talk about it too much as I feel as if there's very little to discuss. In the first film, New York felt like its own character, from seedy speakeasies, the large department stores, Central Park in the wintertime, and various other settings. Paris here is not really much more than a setting. From the canals to the buildings, it's just Paris. Don't get me wrong, I love Paris and would love a baguette about now, but it's nothing more than a backdrop, which is a bit of a disappointment. The settings for this IP up until this point all stood out, from the Burrow to, of course, Hogwarts. Even 4 Privet Drive was a setting that stood out in its suburban mundanity. Grindelwald and his followers need a base, so instead of using some magical structure or something incognito, they decide to enter into the home of what must be presumed to be a wealthy French family, or at least of some class and influence, and just murder them, even bringing the caskets in the hearse. No one passing by asks about it. No neighbors are like, hey, what happened to the young couple that lived here approximately 5 seconds ago? Apparently it goes unnoticed. Upon entering into the home, they find the child is still alive. Apparently the little shit is so quiet playing with his toys that no one heard him. The filmmakers have been around children before, right? The kid didn't investigate the sound as his parents were being hauled into caskets. These parents actually managed to keep a child in his room. Anyways, this kid is swiftly dealt with. Too bad his mother apparently didn't love him, otherwise he would have just gotten a scar. Hey, don't look at me. I don't make the rules, just observe. Heading back to London, we're given our first impressions of Jude Law as a younger Albus Dumbledore. I must admit, I buy this version of Dumbledore. He maintains the sense of playfulness that is associated with the character, while also subduing it enough for believability in a middle-aged man. This is clearly Newt's first interaction with Dumbledore since the events of the first film, as Newt presses him on the Thunderbird, which Albus tipped him off to, knowing he would have to make a journey across the Atlantic, which would, at that time, mean New York City. Kind of strange though, no port keys across the ocean. Is that not a thing? So Dumbledore wanted Newt in New York City because he had heard something about Credence? It's unclear, however, it is revealed that Credence is in Paris, as well as rumors circulating that he is the long-lost, presumed dead half-brother to Leta Lestrange. Since an Obscurus grows in the absence of love, if Newt can find him, love will be introduced?
How, Cooper?
The love towards love.
Albus gives Newt a card that'll lead to a safe house and informs him to head to Paris for Credence. Newt objects and Albus tells him he respects him because Newt does not seek power or status, just what's right. When asked why he can't go, Dumbledore states he cannot move against Grindelwald. Then, using the most annoying tactic in the book, he plays the "oh, you're not up to it" card. Dick move, Albus. Newt returns to his home to find some baby nifflers have escaped. In a similar vein to scenes from the suitcase in the first, Newt cares for some creatures until he hears a crash, which is none other than Jacob and Queenie. The oblivious charm did not work and he remembered it all, so he and Queenie have fled to London to get married, as they don't have laws restricting relationships between magical and non-magical. Wait a minute, Obliviate only works on bad memories, according to this new lore?
Obliviate.
Really gives this a whole new meaning. Newt, happy to see his friends, but more happy to potentially see Tina, begins to look for her before being told that a wizarding gossip rag got it wrong and printed that Newt was to marry Leta, not Theseus, which caused Tina to move on and begin dating someone else. And then we're given a real kick in the gonads. Queenie has lost her goddamn mind and gone full Bill Cosby, charming Jacob to alter his mental state so he would agree to marry her. Jacob, being broken from the charm, has no recollection of the engagement and rightfully so becomes pissed. Queenie grabs her bags and leaves as if she is somehow the victim here. How long was he charmed? This brings up so many questions that I don't really want to dive into, but let's just say the word consent comes to mind. What the actual fuck? Jacob chases after her, telling her that she can't risk prison to get married. She responds by saying he's not giving her a choice. Yes he is. You have a shit ton of options, like emigrate somewhere, petition the establishments of wizarding governance, continue hiding the relationship. That was 30 seconds of thinking. I'm sure I got more, but no matter how long I contemplated it, I would never suggest the wizarding world equivalent of drugging someone into compliance. In the first film, Queenie was sort of forgettable, if not boring, but any positive attributes she had are cast into a dumpster and set ablaze within approximately 3 minutes of being on screen. Of course, she's the real victim here because Jacob had the audacity to think she was crazy, so she disapparates out of there, heading for Paris to meet up with Tina. Crazy is the most milquetoast and tame response one could have. You drug this man, take him halfway across the world, and then leave him in a foreign country? Do I need to call Liam Neeson? What the actual fuck, J.K. Rowling? Since Queenie has left to go to Paris, Newt, discovering Tina is also there and wanting to clear the air about Leta, decides to break the travel ban and go. Okay, so you won't go to save Credence, a kid suffering from an Obscurus, but now that a potential for a booty call exists your game? Newt may not seek status or power, but he is clearly seeking something, alright. Newt packs up and they start heading to Paris, but not before Jacob is dried off. Why does it make the sound of a blow dryer? Is there a small turbine in every wand? Returning to Paris, Tina enters into a magical town square of sorts through this absolute whore of a statue. Have some decency. In the town square is the magical equivalent of a circus, carnies and all. It is rather ironic though. The idea of the typical carnival is the theatrics of presenting something unbelievable almost as if it is magical. Why would that sell in an already extraordinary world doesn't seem to make much sense, but let's go with it. What are a staple of every carny attraction? A human-animal hybrid, of course. Almost like an animagus. Except apparently this one will be doomed to one day not transform back from her beast form, which is a snake due to a blood curse. Her name? God, no. Please. No, by all that is right within the Order of Merlin, please do not let it be. Yup, it's Nagini. What the fuck? Why does Voldemort's pet snake need a backstory? And why is she a good guy? As fate would have it, not only is this Nagini, but Credence works for her captor and they are planning an escape. During the performance, as the escape plan is enacted, things quickly go awry and soon the entire carnival is ensnared in chaos as multiple beasts escape. Realizing there will be investigations and questioning, the Carnies quickly pack up and move along, with Tina unable to locate and catch Credence. Tina speaks with the Carney leader briefly, and it's revealed that Credence is looking for his mother. Another wizard by the name of Arnold Guzman is also looking for Credence, as the rumors would suggest they are possibly related. Arnold convinces Tina to come with him. Sure, follow strangers, nothing bad can ever happen. Moving back to Grindelwald, after taking a massive rip of some really good shit, he begins his bad guy exposition to reveal his plan. Credence must be brought onto his side so that he may defeat Dumbledore, as that is who poses the biggest threat to his movement. Moving back to Jacob and Newt, who are taking a portkey to get to Paris. Newt, nervous about what he will say to Tina, tries some pickup lines, including, "She has eyes like a salamander." Jacob responds, "Just don't say nothing about no salamanders." And we're back. I love the rapport and banter between these two. It stands out as one of the best parts of the franchise, and fortunately this film continues that relationship. Upon arrival in Paris, Jacob and Newt pass through the Jezebel into the magical town square. Newt immediately uses some gold powder that reconstructs the scene from the night before, and since it's gold, somehow the Niffler is of use here. Wouldn't it just pick up all the gold dust? Anyway, he sees that Tina and Arnold had met. Upon finding Arnold's feather, Newt casts a charm to lead them to its owner. Bill Cosby makes her way to the French Ministry of Magic to try and locate Tina, only to find they have no record of her being there. While this plays out, Abernathy is seen leaving the Ministry of Magic with something. Queenie, realizing she is alone in the city, has a nervous breakdown because apparently the density of people is too much for her to handle with her mind-reading ability. You live in New York City. Does she suffer a breakdown every time she leaves the apartment? Noticing the breakdown, Grindelwald's incredibly gorgeous French follower offers to help her, leading her to their hideout where Queenie finds herself in good company. A nice cup of tea amongst a child murderer, an authoritarian despot, and Bill Cosby. Really assembling the Avengers there, pal. Grindelwald soon reveals himself to Queenie, not in a Louis C.K. sort of way, mind you. He convinces her to hear him out, stating he wants her to love freely, then he tells her she can leave, which of course she won't. Cosby was willing to drug her boyfriend for non-consensual marriage. Thinks she's above joining a genocide to get what she wants? Credence and Nagini, after having escaped the Carney life, are on the search for Credence's mother, except they are being tracked by Mr. Subtlety himself. Credence has tracked down the woman whose name was on his adoption papers, Irma. Irma tells him she's not his mother, but was his caretaker. Before she can reveal more, Mr. Subtlety fires an Avada Kedavra, missing Credence but hitting Irma. Credence, pissed, goes full particle effect once again. But little did he know, Mr. Subtlety has a flask of wondrous physic with the bubble tear. That shit is OP. This scene is totally rad though, with all the debris from the building pulsating as it repeatedly collapses in on Mr. Subtlety. Unfazed and with an evil smirk living up to his namesake, he disapparates away, meeting with none other than Grindelwald himself. What? Turns out Irma was his intended target to soften up Credence, making him more susceptible to Grindelwald's attempts at persuasion. But they're doing it all for the greater good, after all. Very fitting tagline for a 20th century utopian despot. Newt and Jacob are now sitting at a cafe waiting for the feather to reveal its owner, Arnold. They ask Arnold about Tina, who denies at first but becomes cooperative when the threat of a missing wizard report is mentioned. He asks if she's tall and, only to have Jacob and Newt fill in the blank at the same time, with Newt saying beautiful and Jacob saying intense. I'm with Jacob. Arnold agrees to take them to where he saw Tina, which is somewhere in the sewers in what looks like a prison cell. Well, as fate would have it, it is a prison cell, and Newt and Jacob are now trapped in there with Tina. He says he will release them once Credence is dead, except as Arnold walks away, he apparently collapses into a state of unconsciousness. Tina rebukes Newt for losing her only lead by killing Arnold, which Newt responds,
Well, how was the interrogation going before we turned up?
He is on fire. He can't be stopped. It's a roast up in this film. Well, Pickett picks the lock and they're out, only to find one of the beasts that had escaped from the Carnies is wreaking havoc, a Chinese lion-looking thing with a pink ribbon for a tail. Newt explains it is an extremely powerful and agile creature, being able to leap from one end of Paris to another in a single bound. Of course, Newt knows exactly how to handle it, and using a cat toy lures it into his suitcase. It's a fairly quick scene and pales in comparison to the beast scenes from the first. There's a bit of destruction and tons of witnesses, so naturally the gang just disapparates out of there. So are we still doing the whole Obliviate thing or no? And the moment that was hyped up in the film, the member berry pie itself, the return to Hogwarts. While I was extremely jaded when I first heard the film was going to return to Hogwarts, I will give the film credit here. It doesn't overstay its welcome in the location and does offer some genuinely interesting moments. Take, for example, the opportunity to see Dumbledore instructing multiple courses, including dueling and the ridiculous charm for boggarts. And it's to Dumbledore's credit and reputation that when the Minister of Magic rushes in with Kool-Aid Man energy and orders the classroom dismissed, the kids stand still and quiet for about a second until Albus instructs them to leave with Professor McGonagall? Wait a minute. How old is this lady? She's looking late 30s to early 40s here, and we discover later that she was a professor while Newt and Lita were there, so she likely, at the very youngest, is in that age group. She's got to at least be 30. The first film and book takes place in the year it was first released, so 1997, and concluding 7 years later, so the conclusion would take place the spring or summer of 2004. This film takes place in 1927, so she is approximately, at the very youngest, 107 years old when the conclusion of the Deathly Hallows occurs. Gotta get some beauty tips from her. Damn. Definitely not an oversight on JK's part, though. The minister inquires why Newt is in Paris and seems to be following credence. He also pushes Dumbledore, insinuating Albus and his followers are up to no good. Dumbledore responds by telling him his policies of suppression and violence are pushing supporters into Grindelwald's army, which is undeniably true of how things work in reality. Fun fact, no one's views have ever been changed from the opposite end of a brandished barrel of a gun, regardless of what they may say to the contrary. One thing interesting about this scene is that there is clearly more to it. This edit is so abrupt, clearly they cut something out, but what? It's not within the deleted scenes in the extended version, so it must not have been important, but it is glaring. The Ministry is off to Paris to try and solve this mess, but not before Dumbledore gives Theseus a warning. If Grindelwald calls a rally, do not go. Ooh, love some foreshadowing. While the men are arguing, Lita roams the halls of Hogwarts, visiting her old desk where L+N is carved. A flashback is shown of Newt and Lita interacting, having a moment while Newt explains he cannot go home for the summer because he needs to care for a baby raven. He does realize ravens only stay in the nest for 5 to 7 weeks, right? What's he going to do the rest of the time? Maybe he finds a basilisk to care for after the ungrateful little shit grows its wings and flies away. The second flashback is of Newt and Lita receiving instructions on the ridiculous charm. Newt's boggart transforms into a desk as he fears an office job more than anything, while for Lita, we see a floating white blanket, flowing gracefully through the air as it descends. The look of terror on Lita's face shows us there is something deeply disturbing about what we're witnessing, and the expert music and imagery aids in a demonstration that's a prime example of show, don't tell. It will be revealed what that is, but holy shit, when you actually stop and think about the boggart lesson from the series, what sort of messed up, psychologically traumatizing educational environment is this? How many kids are seeing their abusive relatives in the boggart, or some other horrible trauma that has happened to them? Seeing Lita upset by what had occurred in the classroom, Newt takes her to a tree where he introduces her to Bowtruckles. While it doesn't go much further, you get that the bond between the two is meaningful, as he came to her side, providing companionship in a time of need in the face of trauma, especially at a young age. Upon exiting the flashback, Dumbledore greets Lita in his typical jovial manner, but she is clearly having none of it. The teacher-student relationship between these two was likely mired in conflict, with Lita viewing him in an unfavorable light. Albus, observing this, quickly changes his tone. There are rumors about her brother, Corvus, that are the source of her ostracism and abuse. Albus tries to provide sympathy, offering a brief admission about his sister, Ariana. We are given her story in the 7th book, but this is the first admission and alluding to the incident that we received directly from the man himself. The acting from Jude Law is expert in this moment, portraying a man who is reflective and sorrowful in his pain. Regret is my constant companion. Do not let it become yours, he warns her. Throughout my life, I have had the opportunity to meet many upbeat, genuine people of positivity. Upon getting to know them, however, many bear the weight of trauma, of hurt and pain, and positivity is their method of dealing with it, of putting out into the world what they want it to be. I can't help but wonder if this is the case with Albus, a man riddled with regret and pain, trying to handle it as best he can through a positive and jovial demeanor. We get a glimpse of Dumbledore peering into the mirror of her eyes, showing him the one thing he wants the most in the world, which is Grindelwald. Perhaps it's a peaceful version of Grindelwald. Perhaps it's a longing to return to his youth spent with this man whom he was likely romantically involved with. Or perhaps the one thing he wants the most is the piece of jewelry Grindelwald carries, which is revealed to be a blood pact. A pact that most likely prevents direct battling with one another. Back in Paris, the gang arrive at Dumbledore's safe house, which it turns out is the home of none other than Nicholas Flamel, the possessor of the Philosopher's Stone. The stone, remember? There's that nostalgia and fan service I live for. Inside the dwelling, Newt treats Arnold by pulling a parasite out of his eye. Newt and Tina comment on the presence of scars on Arnold's hands, indicating an unbreakable vow. As he is still unconscious, Newt and Tina head to the French Ministry of Magic, hoping to retrieve the records for Lita Lestrange to see if proof of Credence's lineage is in there. On the way, Grindelwald calls for a meeting by having giant black cloths flow around the city. No words, no information as to where. Grindelwald tracks down Credence and tells him a location of where he will find the secrets of his true identity, at the Père Lachaise. Newt and Tina enter into the Ministry of Magic with Newt consuming polyjuice potions, so he takes on the appearance of his brother, who just so happens to be there as well. A chase ensues, and the conclusion results in Tina committing assault in front of some Ministry employees who don't react for some reason. Newt and Tina enter into the records department by simply saying her name is Lita Lestrange. Of all the secure goblin technology in Gringotts, there's no magical device that detects identity. Seems like a stretch, and the lady is suspicious, but still, seems a bit off. Anyways, Newt finally gets to come clean to Tina about the misunderstanding around the engagement, and he gets to drop this fire pickup line.
It's interesting because your eyes in newsprint, they have this effect in them, Tina. It's like fire in water, in dark water. I've only ever seen that.
Salamanders.
My man. But an unsurprising twist comes in the form of the actual Lita coming to get the records for herself, only to find them missing, taken by Abernathy when he saw him exiting the Ministry earlier in the film. We also see the records being planted at the cemetery for Credence to discover by none other than Abernathy as well. In its place at the records department is a letter stating the records have been moved to the Lestrange family tomb. Newt and Tina are discovered by Lita, but the hellos are cut short when the old lady returns with some spirit cats that attack. Using the lion with the pink tail, Newt escapes the Ministry with some teleportation skills that were definitely not discussed earlier in the film. Moving on. At the cemetery, a regular hoedown occurs with everyone present. Credence, Nagini, Arnold, Jacob, Tina, Newt, and Lita have all been led to this location. It's revealed that Arnold and Lita are siblings. Arnold's parents were high-status wizards, but Lestrange, Lita's father, used the Imperious Curse to Bill Cosby his mom away from his father and conceive Lita. Alright, what the fuck is going on with the story and people using charms and curses to drug men and women? Their mom died during childbirth, resulting in much grief for Arnold and his father, who makes an unbreakable vow with Arnold on his deathbed that he must kill whoever Lestrange loves the most. He thought it would be Lita, however, it is revealed that Lestrange never loved his own daughter, treating her with disdain. Lestrange remarries and has a child, Corvus, who is the first person he actually loves. Being made aware of Arnold's unbreakable vow, Lestrange sends Corvus to America for safekeeping. While in transit across the ocean, the ship is sunk and Corvus is presumed dead. But I have some questions. Why didn't he ensure the child was adopted into a wizarding family, not a psycho-abusive witch hater? Why did he transport him in an unreliable ship? What about a port key? Or a thestral drawn carriage? Anything would be presumably safer than the waters of the Atlantic. Convinced Credence is Corvus, Arnold readies his wand to deliver the killing curse, except Lita interrupts, stating she killed Corvus. Lita was sent by her father to accompany Irma to America to deliver Corvus, but the baby would not stop crying. Reaching the end of her patience and ability to deal with the constant crying, she switched him with another baby during a period of commotion. Well, that commotion was the ship sinking, and there would be no switching back. Corvus is grabbed by Credence's caretaker, and a notice of it being a different baby is not apparent during the hectic moment that is a sinking ship. Her boat capsizes and Corvus is sent into the water, hence the imagery of the floating white sheet drifting gently and gracefully into the depths of the ocean. I mentioned this for the first film, and it stands the same here. David Yates has an exceptional ability to create sequences of horror that have an element of beauty to them, combining grace with terror. This is what Lita fears the most, and this trauma, this singular event, has shaped her entire life. Newt tells her it's not her fault, to which she replies, "You've never met a monster you couldn't love." Is she speaking generally or to the fact that Newt did love her and she did not return it? Given what we have discussed and know, I feel this is the most likely possibility. Regardless, now no one knows who the hell Credence actually is, and on cue, the meeting of the minds is occurring in an arena of sorts within the cemetery. Jacob is reunited with Queenie, but as they attempt to leave, they are stopped by Grindelwald's followers. Having no way out, they're stuck listening to Grindelwald's speech. Newt and Tina realize that everything from Queenie to the family tree has been bait, and they're in a bad spot. Grindelwald begins his speech by making statements about the non-magical. He doesn't see them as lesser, but other, and that he does not fight out of hatred. This twisting of language is a trademark of 20th century utopian regimes, from fascism to communism. If one controls the language, then they can control thought itself, giving followers the illusion they're acting out of compassion while committing acts of depravity and brutality. After taking another fat rip off the hookah taken from under the bed of your average Hot Topic employee, he blows out a vision of a second Great War, including the use of the nuclear bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's a powerful vision, and Grindelwald uses the horror of that imagery to convince his fellow wizards that they must join his side to stop the arrogance, power lust, and appetite for destruction that exists within humanity. How long before they turn their tools of war on the wizarding world? This ideology marred the 20th century and still haunts us to this very day. I appreciate the idea that humans with the tools of modern destruction pose a serious threat to the wizarding world. I always had some suspension of disbelief with the Harry Potter series, especially the end. They're having this massive battle, dueling with wands where curses and jinxes can be countered. No one brought a peace? Where are the house elves with 100-round drums on their AR-15s mowing down Death Eaters? The centaurs fight with bow and arrows, after all. An upgrade is overdue, and the absence of modern tools of warfare within this series has always been a bit of a tough pill to swallow. So maybe we will see it addressed in the coming films. Mentioning it at least deserves credit. While this is all going on, the British Ministry of Magic shows up with the orders to arrest each and every one of them. Grindelwald tells his followers not to attack them, but then proceeds to say they've killed his followers in cold blood and subjected him to torture. This is all part of an elaborate ruse. He knows exactly what he is doing, saying the words of urging peace while simultaneously making inflammatory statements. In a situation like this, with tensions high, anger and itchy trigger figures all around, Grindelwald knows violence is guaranteed. The brilliance is that he's saying the same words to all of his followers. They are all hearing the same words, but they're interpreting them within their own biases. The peace-inclined members of the audience are hearing the words of an urging for pacifism, while the hot-headed are getting riled up by the anger-inducing perception of injustice that is occurring. So of course one follower draws their wand, causing an aura to strike first, killing her. In an audience that big, very few people likely saw her draw first. So what story leaving the scene will become most prominent? The story of a few eyewitnesses saying she drew first, or the overwhelming majority stating it was the Aurors who drew first blood? Perhaps you drew it, but didn't intend to fire, making a show of force instead of a use of force. You can see, just like similar events in the real world we inhabit, this story is going to rock the wizarding world, and Grindelwald will inevitably come out of this with general perception favoring him and his followers, and echoing his message, that it is not him and his followers who are violent. Like most propaganda, like the majority of every major story, there are always two sides, with neither having a monopoly on the truth. While Grindelwald is standing over the body of a slain follower, the Niffler, having escaped from Newt's case, steals the blood pact. After his followers disapparate, the Aurors move in to conduct the arrest of Grindelwald, who has created a ring of blue fire. It's telling to see that as soon as most of his followers are gone, he begins killing the Aurors with seeming glee, taunting them to play by the rules, which are join him or die. Credence, desperate for the truth, passes through the fire to join him, while Nagini refuses to join. Queenie also joins, but not before pleading for Jacob to join her. This time Jacob calls her crazy for real. About time, my man. Stick up for yourself. Seemingly trapped and damned to death, Newt and Theseus fight for their lives. Lita Lestrange mounts a diversion, seemingly ready to join Grindelwald. Before she attacks Grindelwald, she turns in the direction of Newt and Theseus, stating, "I love you, but to whom?" She proceeds with her attack, which of course fails, but does knock over the bong, allowing for a moment for the rest of them to disapparate out of there. Theseus attacks the flames desperately, trying to get to Lita, while Newt just kind of stands there.
Don't just stare at me, go!
Grindelwald kills Lita with seemingly no effort. Grindelwald decides he hates Paris and is going to burn it all to the ground using some blue flame dragons. The remaining wizards, along with Nicholas Flamel, prevent the destruction. I absolutely hate this part. You just had this excellent finale filled with tension, terror, intelligent writing including nuance and philosophy and propaganda, as well as loss. But because the movie needs to make a shit ton of money, we better put as much CGI and explosions as we can fit in an epic conclusion. It's completely unnecessary and only serves to cheapen the moment we just witnessed, giving us no time to breathe and take it in. The gang returns to Hogwarts to deliver the blood pact to Dumbledore, which he reveals is in fact a pact to not fight one another. He believes it may be possible to break though. Meanwhile, Grindelwald reveals to Credence that his real name is Aurelius Dumbledore. Fuck off. Seriously? Why does everything in spin-offs, prequels, and sequels always have to relate back to the original primary characters? Why are writers so damn afraid to make new characters that have to stand on their own? Rowling did this with the first film quite well, but now we're undoing that by saying, oh, there's actually a secret Dumbledore. Oh, surprise! And we're just supposed to buy it? What is gained from this? Why does everything have to always relate back to the primary character of the previous beloved franchise? And before anyone goes stating the story is incomplete and it may work for this series, has it ever actually worked? Didn't work in Star Wars, twice. Didn't work in The Hobbit, didn't work in Indiana Jones. The only one it sort of worked in was Blade Runner 2049, and I'm not sure that it did. The rest of the film is just so good that I can overlook it. Another gripe I have with this film is the killing off of Lita. I get you want to set up a world where there are stakes and characters can die. Rowling has always built that world quite well, but Sirius had 3 books before dying, giving time for the relationship between him and Harry to grow, so his death had impact. To her writing, Lita's death does have impact, but there's still so much more that needs to be uncovered here. I have no doubt the next film will dive into some of it through exposition and flashbacks, but I can't help but feel this was far too hasty and needless. I would put Lita as the most intriguing, nuanced, and ambiguous character in the story so far. She has depth, struggle, darkness, joy, and love within her story arc. Newt has the charm for sure, but there was something special here and her death feels premature. One thing is for certain, if they pull the psych, she's not actually dead in the next film, I'm going to be pissed. Don't retcon the story because you fucked it up. Accept the blunder and move on as best you can. As I stated at the beginning of this review, it's not that Crimes of Grindelwald is a bad film, it's just a sloppy mess. The pacing is all over the place, and at only 2 hours, I still can't believe how long it feels. There are a lot of story arcs crammed into this, and none of them really come to a satisfying conclusion. The fan service is a bit heavy-handed, and the story writing is widely inconsistent. You get moments of brilliance like the stories of Arnold and Lita, the depth and expansion to Dumbledore, but then you also get the sloppy mess that is Queenie, illogical decisions by characters made all around, a backstory to Voldemort's snake, and for fuck's sake, why does there need to be another Dumbledore? David Yates proves himself again as a competent director. I believe he was just screwed by the script and story. James Newton Howard returns for the score, and it stands out as a highlight, removing the jazzy and swing undertones of the first and replacing it with a slightly more dark, sinister tone. I appreciate what he did. Whew! At nearly 14,000 words, I think I've said enough about these films. I'm sure I missed some stuff, and my opinions are my own, but I hope you've enjoyed this video, especially if you actually managed to make it all the way to the end. This was a substantial amount of time more than I thought it was going to take, so if you enjoyed it, I truly would appreciate any likes and subs. Also, did I get stuff wrong? Disagree with my takes? Sound off in the comments, I'd love to read it. I'll be seeing the 3rd film shortly, and we'll be working on a video, so keep your eyes open for that. I'll probably do a shorter video based upon my initial reaction. Then when the film comes to HBO Max, I will do another proper deep dive. Here's to hoping it's something worth talking about. God help us all.